For 15 years, I was the invisible daughter who sent $20,500 every single month to keep my family afloat. I gave up my vacations, my peace of mind, and over $450,000 in total, thinking I was being the good child. But last Christmas, I overheard my mother telling the whole family that I never sent a dime and that I owed them just for the burden of raising me. I couldn't believe the woman I supported was exploiting me while smiling to my face. They thought they could keep me in the shadows while my brother Julian took all the credit for my hard work. But they forgot one thing. I kept the receipts. By New Year's Eve, 30 of our relatives learned the shocking truth about where that money was really coming from. I didn't scream and I didn't cry. I simply walked into the party with a notarized briefcase and exposed 15 years of family deception in front of everyone they wanted to impress. It's a paradox, isn't it? The more you give to some people, the more they feel entitled to destroy your self-worth. The reality is, they didn't just lose their benefactor that night, they lost their dignity. What happened next changed our family forever and proved that karma is a debt that always gets collected. I was the silent engine keeping my family's world turning. Every single month, like clockwork, I sent that money to my parents' account in Chicago, thinking I was protecting their retirement. That's a fortune built on my own sweat, missed vacations, and endless overtime shifts. I never asked for a thank you because, in my mind, such deep manipulation was something that happened to other people, not us. I truly believed my financial sacrifice was the glue holding our family drama together, keeping us all safe. But 3 weeks ago, during an early visit for the holidays, I was standing in the hallway when I heard my mother's voice. She was on the phone with her sister, laughing about how poor Marcus was the only one who ever looked out for them. Then she said the words that felt like a physical blow to my chest. "Courtney, she's never sent a dime. She's too busy being selfish." My heart stopped as she continued, claiming that I actually owed them for the burden of raising me. I stood there, frozen, realizing that every cent I had sacrificed was being treated as a non-existent debt. It was the ultimate betrayal, a cold-blooded erasure of my entire adult life and the self-worth I had tied to helping them. I couldn't believe the woman who tucked me in at night was now painting me as a ghost, a financial parasite. The shocking part wasn't just the lie itself, but the sheer ease with which she discarded over a decade of my loyalty. I was being backstabbed in my own childhood home while my bank account was drained to fund their comfort. The room felt cold, and for the first time in my life, the veil of duty was ripped away. I felt humiliated and shamed, thinking of all the times I stayed home while they went on cruises I secretly funded. They were living a lie, and they were using my name as the villain in their twisted story to gain sympathy. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the cruelty of their love, a breach of the most sacred bond. I realized then that my parents didn't see a daughter. They saw an ATM that didn't talk back. The truth was staring me in the face, and it was uglier than I ever imagined. I wanted to scream, to run into that room and throw my bank statements in her face right then and there. But a strange, icy calm washed over me as I gripped the hallway wall, my knuckles turning white with rage. I realized that if I reacted now, I'd just be the crazy, emotional daughter they always labeled me as. I needed to play this differently if I wanted true justice and a payback that they could never recover from. I had always dreamed of one day funding scholarships for girls who were told there was no budget for their future, just like I was, and in that moment, I knew exactly how I'd spend my money from now on. I quietly backed away, slipped out the front door, and sat in my car, breathing through the fire in my lungs. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a calculated game, and I had been the only one playing by the rules. My mother had no idea that her selfish daughter had just overheard the expiration date of her comfortable life. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I looked at my balance, knowing this was the last time they'd see my name on a transfer. But before I cut them off, I had to ensure the whole family saw the karma coming their way. Growing up, the hierarchy in our house was clearer than a crystal vase. My brother Julian was the golden prince, and I was the shadow. While he was bought brand new cars and had his Ivy League dreams fully funded, I was told there was just no budget for my tuition. I spent my 20s working 3 jobs, drowning in debt, while Julian found himself on European backpacking trips paid for by my parents. They called it supporting his potential, but to me, it felt like I was being cheated out of a fair start. Every time I succeeded, they redirected the spotlight back to his struggles. The family drama was constant, with my parents constantly guilt-tripping me into helping Julian with his rent or his startup ideas. I was the responsible one, the one who never complained, the one who was always expected to pick up the tab. They treated my achievements as a communal resource, but treated Julian's failures as a family tragedy that I was obligated to fix. It was a classic case of exploitation dressed up as sibling support. And for years, I swallowed my resentment to keep the peace. I sacrificed my own comfort to ensure Julian never had to face the justice of his own poor decisions. I couldn't believe how blind I had been, thinking that if I just gave a little more, I would finally earn the same respect he received. My self-worth had become tied to being the fixer, the one who saved the day with a wire transfer or a paid bill. But the reality was that they didn't value my sacrifice. They expected it as if it were my natural penance for being born. I was being used by the very people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders, all to protect the ego of a man who never worked for anything. The breach of our bond was deep, a generational wound they refused to acknowledge. I remember one specific Christmas where I gave them a luxury vacation package, and they spent the whole dinner praising Julian for allowing them to go. He hadn't contributed a cent, yet he sat there basking in the glory while I sat at the end of the table, invisible. I felt humiliated and shamed, realizing that my parents were actively helping him steal my identity as the provider. They were drowning in their own pride, convinced that their son was a success and their daughter was just a supporting character. It was a shocking display of favoritism that poisoned every holiday I ever achieved. They viewed my financial success not as a result of my grit, but as a debt I owed them for the privilege of being raised in Julian's shadow. It was a twisted logic that kept me trapped in a cycle of giving and never receiving, a form of emotional betrayal that left me hollow. My mother would often say, "Julian needs us more," which was code for, "You don't matter as long as he's okay." The vengeance brewing inside me wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the years of being told I was less than. I was done being the backup plan for a family that didn't even recognize my presence. The dynamic was a trap, a well-oiled machine designed to extract everything from me while giving all the credit to the golden boy. I realized that as long as I kept paying, I was just enabling my own erasure and funding my own humiliation. My parents and Julian were a team, and I was the outside investor they were planning to defraud one last time. But the tides were shifting, and the invisible daughter was about to become the most visible person in the room. I started looking back at the old bank records, realizing just how deep the rabbit hole of their deception really went. When I got home that night, my husband David saw the look in my eyes and knew the peace had finally shattered. I didn't scream or break plates. I sat at the kitchen island and opened my laptop with a cold, surgical precision. Instead of a messy confrontation that they could twist into me being unstable, I chose the path of cold, hard facts. David held my hand and reminded me that dignity isn't found in a shouting match, but in the power of the truth. We began the process of reclaiming my life, one document at a time, building a fortress of proof. We spent the entire night downloading 15 years of bank transfers, wire receipts, and canceled checks that proved every cent I had sent. It was a shocking trail of evidence, a $450,000 roadmap of my misplaced loyalty and their calculated greed. Seeing the numbers laid out like that made the betrayal feel even more visceral. It was black and white, undeniable and cold. My parents thought they could lie their way out of this, but they didn't realize I was keeping a ledger they never expected to see. This was the beginning of my vengeance, a strategy built on silence and airtight documentation. I couldn't believe how much I had actually given while being told I was doing nothing. The family drama was about to meet the reality of a forensic audit, and I felt a surge of self-worth returning with every page I printed. This wasn't about being petty. It was about justice and ensuring that the narrative of the ungrateful daughter was burned to the ground. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of a reckoning that would leave them with nowhere to hide. My mother's false reputation was about to face the ultimate test, and she had no idea I was the one holding the gradebook. David was my anchor, reminding me that a public exposed moment was more powerful than any private argument could ever be. Over the next 10 days, I worked quietly and methodically, becoming a ghost in their lives while I prepared my strike. We decided that the upcoming New Year's Eve party, the one my parents used to brag about Julian, would be the perfect stage. I wasn't going to let them control the story anymore. I was going to hand the script to everyone they cared about. Karma was being prepared in a leather briefcase, 47 pages of notarized reality that would stop the music. I reached out to my CPA, instructing him to certify every single transfer I had made to my parents for the last 15 years. I wanted the official seal, the weight of authority that would make it impossible for them to claim I had faked the records. This was about payback, but the kind that is delivered with a smile and a Happy New Year. I was tired of being backstabbed in silence. It was time to let the facts do the talking for me. The anticipation of their faces when they saw the stamps and signatures kept me focused and surprisingly calm throughout the week. As the days ticked down to the party, I continued my invisible act, even answering my mother's guilt-tripping texts with short, polite replies. She had no clue that the daughter she was mocking to the relatives was currently dismantling her financial future. Every "I love you, honey" she sent felt like a fresh deception, a fake layer of affection over a core of pure exploitation. I was preparing to deliver a lesson in self-worth that the whole family would never forget, and the briefcase was already packed. I just had to wait for the clock to strike midnight on their long-running scam. On Christmas Eve, the final straw snapped when I heard my father telling my cousin that they had to loan me money for my mortgage. I was sitting in the next room, holding a glass of wine, listening to him describe a struggle that never existed while I was the one paying his property taxes. The shocking audacity of his words made my blood boil, but I didn't let a single tear fall this time. Instead, I stepped outside and called my CPA, telling him I needed the certified records delivered to my office immediately. I also contacted my estate lawyer to make one very specific, very permanent change to my will. I officially removed my parents and Julian from any and all future benefits, insurance policies, and my emergency contact list. The betrayal had gone too deep for half measures. I was cutting the umbilical cord of my bank account once and for all. It was a moment of pure reclaiming, a realization that my self-worth was no longer up for negotiation or theft. They wanted to paint me as the daughter who never sent a dime? Fine. Now that lie was going to become their new, very expensive reality. I couldn't believe how light I felt after signing those papers, knowing justice was in motion. The truth was that they were addicts to my money, and I was the one who had been enabling their habit of disrespect. By documenting every transfer, I was preparing to show the world the backstabbed reality of my life as their primary financier. The family drama was about to go from a private tragedy to a public scandal, and I was the one holding the evidence. I wasn't just angry. I was disgusted by the failure of their parental roles, the way they traded a daughter's love for a son's ego. The karma I was building wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting a boundary. I spent the day after Christmas organizing the 47-page dossier, making sure every date, every dollar, and every bank stamp was perfectly visible. This was my vengeance, a tangible, notarized weapon that would dismantle 15 years of their carefully crafted lies. I felt a sense of dignity returning, a feeling of enough is enough that gave me the strength to look them in the eye at dinner. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was the one who knew exactly how the house was built and exactly how to bring it down. The humiliated feeling I had lived with was starting to shift toward them. Every time my mother complained about the cost of living while wearing the designer earrings I bought her, I just smiled. I knew that in a few days she'd have to figure out how to pay for those things herself without my non-existent help. Payback was going to be total, a complete freezing of the assets they had grown so entitled to over the decades. I was reclaiming my future, the one I had almost lost by trying to buy the love of people who didn't have any to give. The dossier sat on my desk, a silent promise that the facts would be the last thing they heard from me. I checked the guest list for the New Year's Eve party one last time. 30 relatives, including the ones they had lied to the most. It was the perfect audience for an exposed moment that would leave no room for excuses or misunderstandings. I wanted justice to be witnessed by everyone who had ever looked at me with pity because of my parents' stories. The daughter they backstabbed was about to take center stage, and the performance was going to be flawless. I went to bed that night with a peace of mind I hadn't felt since I was a child, before the money started flowing. The morning of the party, a courier delivered a heavy black leather briefcase to my door, the culmination of my silent war. Inside were the 47 pages of notarized history, each sheet a testament to a daughter's love and a family's betrayal. I ran my fingers over the official stamps, feeling the weight of the facts that were about to be unleashed on my unsuspecting parents. This wasn't just paper, it was my dignity, recovered from the trash heap where they had thrown it. I was ready to stop the family drama with a dose of reality so strong it would leave them breathless. As I dressed for the party, I chose a bold, sharp outfit that screamed confidence, a far cry from the disposable daughter they were used to. I tucked the briefcase into the back seat of my car like it was a high-stakes bomb, which, in a way, it was. I felt a surge of self-worth, knowing that for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't going there to be an ATM. I was going there to be the judge, the jury, and the one who finally delivered justice. The shocking revelation was only hours away, and the vengeance felt like a cool breeze on a summer day. I couldn't believe I was actually doing this, but the memory of my mother's voice on the phone kept my resolve steady. She had lied to everyone, but tonight she was going to be exposed in front of the very people she tried to impress. The cruelty of her words had broken something inside me that couldn't be fixed with a simple apology or a hug. I was reclaiming the narrative, taking back my name from the mud she had dragged it through for so long. The karma of her own deceit was about to catch up to her at 70 miles per hour, and I was driving. When I arrived at the house, the atmosphere was already buzzing with the usual fake laughter and golden boy stories about Julian. My parents greeted me with that condescending, "Oh, you finally made it" look, completely unaware of the briefcase in my hand. I felt humiliated for them, knowing how far they were about to fall from their pedestal of lies and manipulation. I stood in the corner, nursing a drink, watching them play their roles perfectly for the audience of 30 relatives. It was a masterclass in betrayal, and I was the only person in the room who knew the play was a tragedy. I kept the briefcase close, a silent companion that gave me a strange sense of power in a house that always made me feel small. Every time someone mentioned how generous Julian was, I just nodded, knowing the truth was tucked away in my leather bag. The payback was going to be poetic, a public unraveling of a private scam that had lasted nearly 2 decades. I wasn't just backstabbed, I was prepared, and that made all the difference in the world tonight. I waited for the moment when the toasts would begin, the moment when my father would inevitably thank his savior son. The clock was ticking toward the big reveal, and I could feel the adrenaline humming in my veins like a wire. I looked around the room at the aunts and cousins who had been fed a diet of lies about my selfishness for years. I didn't hate them. I hated the people who had poisoned their minds against me for the sake of a few $1,000s a month. This was about reclaiming my place in the family, or at least ensuring they knew why I was walking away forever. The tension in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating focus. The room went quiet as my father stood up, clinking his glass to get everyone's attention for the annual New Year's toast. He started his usual speech, praising Julian for being the pillar of the family and the one who sacrificed everything to keep them afloat. Then he turned his gaze toward me, his voice dripping with a fake, disappointed sadness that made my skin crawl. "And to Courtney," he said, "we hope this year you finally learn the value of family and stop thinking only of yourself." The room fell into an awkward, pitying silence as I was publicly humiliated again. I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, but this time it was accompanied by a sharp, clear sense of justice that gave me wings. I didn't look down, and I didn't cry. Instead, I stood up slowly, picking up the black briefcase from the chair beside me. "Actually, Dad," I said, my voice steady and echoing through the silent room, "I think it's time we talk about the real value of this family." I walked to the center table, the eyes of 30 shocked relatives following my every move like a spotlight. I couldn't believe how calm I felt as I clicked the latches open. The shocking transition from the quiet daughter to the woman in control sent a ripple of unease through my parents' faces. I reached into the briefcase and pulled out the 47-page notarized dossier, fanning the sheets across the table like a deck of cards. "Here is the truth," I said, pointing to the certified bank stamps and the $450,000 total clearly highlighted in yellow. 15 years of monthly transfers, property tax payments, and emergency loans for Julian that I personally funded. The family drama reached its peak as the first aunt picked up a page, her eyes widening. My mother tried to speak, her face turning a ghostly shade of white as she realized her false reality was crumbling in real time. "Courtney, stop this right now," she hissed. But I just smiled and handed another page to my uncle, the family's most respected elder. "It's not humiliation, Mom," I replied. "It's exposed reality, the kind you've been hiding while you told everyone I never sent a dime." The room erupted into whispers and gasps as the evidence passed from hand to hand, proving the selfish daughter was the one who had been paying for their cruises. Karma was finally here. I watched as Julian tried to shrink into the background, his golden boy image dissolving with every notarized signature the relatives verified. He had been backstabbed by the truth, caught in a web of silent complicity that had lasted for over a decade. The exploitation of my hard work was laid bare, and the look of pure shock on my cousins' faces was the only payback I ever needed. I was reclaiming my dignity in the most public way possible, ensuring no one could ever use the word ungrateful with my name again. The vengeance was complete. "I'm done being your secret benefactor," I announced, my voice cutting through the rising chaos of the room like a blade. I looked my parents directly in the eyes, seeing the fear and shame they had tried so hard to project onto me for years. "The payments stopped tonight, and as of yesterday, you have both been removed from my will and all insurance benefits." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of justice being served cold on a silver platter. I had finally broken the cycle of family betrayal, and the look of defeat on their faces told me I had won. The room felt like it was spinning as my Uncle Robert stood up, his face red with a mix of confusion and mounting fury. He held page 12 of my dossier, which clearly showed a $15,000 transfer I made to cover my parents' medical emergency that turned out to be a luxury kitchen renovation. "You told us Julian paid for that," he shouted at my father, his voice trembling with the realization that he'd been played for a fool too. The shocking domino effect had begun, and the carefully constructed wall of lies was falling on top of everyone. I sat back, watching justice unfold. My mother was sobbing now, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of being caught in front of her social circle. She tried to grab the papers from the table, but my cousin Sarah pulled them away, her eyes fixed on a transfer from 3 years ago. "Wait," Sarah whispered. "This was the month they told everyone you were stealing from their retirement fund to buy a new car." The betrayal was so deep, it was almost comical, a level of family drama that left everyone in the room questioning every story they'd ever heard. I couldn't believe how many lies they had stacked up. The truth was acting like a wildfire, jumping from one relative to the next as they compared my documents to the stories they'd been told. Julian was cornered by 2 of our cousins who were demanding to know why he had let them believe he was the one supporting our parents. The failure of his silence was now his greatest crime, and he had no excuses left to hide behind. I felt a profound sense of self-worth as I realized I didn't have to say another word. The paper trail was doing all the heavy lifting for me. I was reclaiming my reputation. I watched my father try to bluster his way out of it, claiming the bank records were faked, but the notarized stamps shut him down instantly. No one believed him anymore. The exposed reality was too clear, too detailed, and too long-standing to be denied. He looked like a broken man, not because of what he'd done to me, but because he had lost his status as the proud father of a successful son. Payback was hitting him where it hurt most: his ego and his public standing. The daughter they backstabbed was now the only one with integrity left. "Is this why you always told us not to call Courtney?" another aunt asked, her voice dripping with disgust as she realized she'd been a pawn in their game. The room was no longer a party, it was a courtroom, and the verdict was unanimous and devastating for my parents. They were being shamed by the very people they had tried to impress with my money and Julian's fake achievements. It was a vengeance that required no violence, only the courage to stand up and show the receipts of a lifetime of sacrifice. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. As the arguments grew louder and the accusations flew across the room, I stood up and straightened my coat, ready to leave the wreckage behind. I had done what I came to do. I had turned the light on in a room full of shadows, and the monsters were finally visible. The family betrayal was no longer a secret I had to carry alone. It was a public record that would follow them forever. I looked at the briefcase, now empty of its burden, and felt a sense of dignity that no amount of money could ever buy. I was walking out of their lives forever. Before I stepped out of the house, I turned back one last time to address the stunned, arguing crowd that used to be my family. "Just so we're all clear," I said, my voice cutting through the noise with a cold professional finality, "the bank account is officially closed." I informed my parents that the $2,500 they expected on the first of the month was already gone, redirected to that scholarship fund for girls I always dreamed of. Justice felt poetic. My money would finally go to someone who actually appreciated the value of a chance. I was reclaiming my financial future. The look of pure panic on my father's face was the ultimate payback. He finally realized that his selfish daughter was his only lifeline. Without my checks, their lifestyle was going to collapse within weeks, and Julian certainly wasn't going to step up to save them. The family drama was about to get very real and very broke, a consequence they never thought they'd have to face. I felt a surge of self-worth, knowing that I was finally setting a boundary that no amount of guilt-tripping could ever break. They had backstabbed me for the last time. I couldn't believe how long I had let them treat me like a disposable resource, but that version of Courtney died the moment I opened that briefcase. The truth was that they didn't love me. They loved the comfort I provided, and those are two very different things. By cutting them off, I wasn't being cruel. I was finally practicing the self-worth I had been denied since childhood. The failure of their parenting was being met with the karma of their own greed and dishonesty. I felt a sense of dignity that was far more valuable than the $450,000 I had lost. I also made it clear that any relative who tried to mediate or guilt me into resuming payments would be blocked immediately. I was done with the deception and the flying monkeys who enabled their behavior for the sake of peace. This was about vengeance through absence, the most powerful tool I had left in my arsenal. If they wanted to believe the lies my parents told, they were welcome to fund their lifestyle themselves from now on. The shocking reality of the situation was starting to sink in for everyone, and the pity was no longer directed at me. As I walked toward the front door, my mother chased after me, screaming that I was killing them and that I'd be sorry when they were gone. I didn't even turn around. I just kept walking, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor with a rhythm of total liberation. I was reclaiming my peace of mind, leaving the humiliated and shamed remains of my past behind me. They had traded a daughter for a narrative, and now they were left with a story that no one wanted to hear anymore. Justice was in the closure, the finality of a door shutting. The air outside was crisp and cold, a perfect reflection of the clarity I felt as I sat in my car and locked the doors. I took a deep breath, feeling the oxygen reach parts of my soul that had been suffocated by duty for 15 years. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was a woman who had survived a deep family betrayal and come out the other side with her head held high. Payback was not just about the money. It was about the freedom to never have to prove my worth to them ever again. I drove away, and I didn't look back. In the weeks following the party, the fallout from my briefcase moment began to expose a much darker, more tangled web of deception. It turned out my parents hadn't just been lying about me. They had been using my financial success to scam other relatives too. My Aunt Martha called me, crying, confessing that she had invested $20,000 into one of Julian's startups because my mother told her I was also a major shareholder. The shocking truth was that they had been using my reputation as a shield to defraud the entire family. My name was bait for a trap. The family drama escalated as more cousins came forward with stories of loans given to my parents that were never repaid. They had all been told the same lie, that I was handling the finances and would ensure everyone was made whole. I couldn't believe the scale of the betrayal. It wasn't just a few lies to save face. It was a coordinated, multi-year financial charade. My parents were the architects, and Julian was the face of a scam that had drained the family's savings. Justice was now uncovering a criminal level of cruelty to their own blood. Seeing the truth laid out like this made me realize that my decision to cut them off wasn't just for me. It was a public service. They had used my self-worth as a weapon against the people I cared about, turning my hard work into a tool for their greed. Karma was hitting them from every direction now, as angry phone calls and threats of lawsuits replaced the holiday cards. They were being exposed as the predators they were, and the vengeance was no longer just mine. It belonged to the whole family. I felt a strange sense of dignity in knowing I stopped the bleeding. Julian's debt-driven charade was finally crumbling, and without my monthly transfers to hide the holes, his entire life was exposed as a fraud. He had no startup, no investments, just a mountain of credit card debt and a lifestyle funded by the people he had lied to. The backstabbed relatives were now demanding payback, and for once, I wasn't the one they were looking to for the money. It was a shocking reversal of fortune that left my parents and brother completely isolated in the mess they had created. Seeing them face the consequences was profoundly healing. I felt humiliated for ever sharing a name with them, but I also felt a deep sense of reclaiming my own identity apart from their crimes. I helped the relatives organize their own documentation, acting as a witness to the patterns of deceit I had finally broken. The family betrayal was a generational infection, and I was the one who had finally applied the cure, no matter how much it stung. My self-worth was no longer tied to protecting their secrets. It was tied to the courage of speaking the truth. We were all victims of the same scam. The web was so large, it took months to fully untangle, revealing even more hidden debts and broken promises my parents had made in my name. Every new discovery was a fresh betrayal, but it only served to strengthen my resolve to stay far, far away from them. I was building a life defined by dignity and honesty, two things that were clearly extinct in my childhood home. The karma of their actions was a slow-motion wreck, and I was watching it from a safe, peaceful distance. I knew the final chapter was coming, but I had already moved on. 6 months have passed since that New Year's Eve, and my life has undergone a total, beautiful transformation. I ignored the desperate, guilt-tripping emails from my mother and the lawyer letters Julian tried to send to scare me into paying his debts. I realized that justice isn't just about the big reveal. It's about the daily choice to protect your own peace and self-worth. I've officially cut all ties, and the silence from that side of the family is the most expensive and precious gift I've ever received. I am finally reclaiming the years I lost to people who never deserved me. A major turning point came when I reconnected with my Aunt Claire, who had been estranged and erased from the family years ago for being difficult. After we talked, I discovered the shocking truth. She had been the Courtney of her generation, the one they exploited until she finally stood up for herself. Hearing her story was a massive moment of self-worth for me. It proved that the patterns were generational, not my fault. She became the new family I needed, a woman who understood the facts and the cost of dignity. We both found justice in our shared survival. I couldn't believe how much energy I had been wasting on people who were essentially professional emotional vampires. My vengeance was simply living a life they no longer had access to. A life filled with genuine friends and a husband who truly sees me. The failure of my parents' love has been replaced by the loyalty of a chosen family that values me for who I am, not what I can provide. I am reclaiming my time, my money, and my joy, and the karma of my happiness is the best response to their lies. I am no longer being used. My bank account is healthy, my stress levels are at an all-time low, and I finally took that trip to the Amalfi Coast I'd been putting off for a decade. Every sunset I watch feels like a piece of justice, a reminder that I am no longer funding a lifestyle for people who mocked my name. The family drama is a closed book, a tragedy I survived and learned from, but no longer live in. I feel humiliated for them, but never for myself anymore, because I know I did the right thing for my own soul. The truth has truly set me free. I've learned that self-worth isn't something you can buy for other people. It's something you have to claim for yourself by saying no. My parents and Julian are now facing the justice of their own choices, living a life of scarcity and shamed reputations that they built with their own hands. I don't wish them ill. I just wish to never see them again, which is the ultimate form of payback. I am reclaiming my future, and it looks brighter than I ever dreamed possible when I was the invisible daughter. My story isn't about the money I lost. It's about the woman I found. As I sit on my balcony tonight, looking out at the city, I feel a profound sense of peace and dignity that fills my chest. I am the architect of my own life now, and the foundation is built on facts, not on the lies of a broken family. I hope my story serves as a warning to anyone else who is being cheated out of their own life by the people they love most. You don't owe them your soul, and you certainly don't owe them your silence when they are backstabbing you. Justice is waiting for you too. You just have to be brave enough to open the briefcase. This story is a painful reminder that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. It takes a special kind of courage to stop being the fixer and start being the one who demands justice. But tell me, have you ever felt invisible in your own family while you were the one doing all the heavy lifting? Have you ever had a Julian in your life who took the credit for your sacrifices? I want to hear your stories in the comments below, because we need to break the silence on this kind of exploitation. Don't let anyone make you feel humiliated for setting boundaries or walking away from people who only value your bank account. Your self-worth is not up for negotiation, and sometimes the best payback is simply living a life they no longer had access to. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're going to keep diving into these shocking revelations and providing the insights you need to reclaim your dignity and find your own justice. Remember, the truth doesn't just set you free, it gives you your life back.